Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon watching the massive alien ship approach through the dark void of space. The vessel looked nothing like human designs with its smooth curves and bright white surface that seemed to glow with inner light. No sharp edges or weapon ports were visible anywhere on its hull. Everything about it suggested peace and advanced technology far beyond anything Earth had ever created. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies," reported Communications Officer Kelly Wright from her station. "The message is repeating in what appears to be mathematical sequences and basic pictographs." Jake nodded and moved closer to study the incoming data on the main screen. After 3 months of deep space exploration beyond the edge of the solar system, humanity had finally encountered proof that they were not alone in the universe. The moment felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Can we decode it?" Jake asked. "Working on it now, sir," Kelly replied while her fingers danced across the control panel. "The computer is running translation protocols. It looks like they're trying to establish basic communication using universal constants." Captain Lisa Rodriguez entered the bridge at that moment. Her dark hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail and her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. She had been chosen to lead this first contact mission because of her skills in diplomacy and her ability to remain calm under pressure. "Status report," Lisa said as she took her position in the captain's chair. "Unknown vessel maintaining distance of 50,000 kilometers," Jake reported. "No weapon signatures detected." "They appear to be trying to communicate." "Any signs of hostility?" Lisa asked. "None, Captain. If anything, they seem to be going out of their way to appear non-threatening." Dr. Alex Carter hurried onto the bridge carrying a tablet filled with data. As the mission's xenobiologist, he had been studying every piece of information they could gather about the alien vessel since it first appeared on their sensors 6 hours ago. "Captain, I've been analyzing their ship design," Alex said excitedly. "The hull composition suggests materials we've never seen before, but the overall structure indicates a species that evolved without significant conflict. No armor plating, no obvious defensive systems, and the energy readings suggest their technology is focused entirely on peaceful applications." Lisa frowned slightly. In her experience, any species advanced enough for interstellar travel would have encountered conflicts that shaped their technology. A completely peaceful civilization seemed almost too good to be true. "Translation complete," Kelly announced. "They're requesting permission to approach for peaceful contact." The message identifies them as representatives of something called the Zentari Confederation, and they claim to have been observing our species for some time. "Observing us?" Lisa asked with concern in her voice. "According to their message, they've been monitoring radio signals from Earth for the past 50 years. They know about our languages, our culture, and our level of technology. They want to welcome us into what they call the galactic community." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that aliens had been watching Earth for decades without making contact was deeply unsettling. Why reveal themselves now? What had changed? "Captain," Alex said quietly, "I recommend extreme caution. Any species with the ability to observe us undetected for 50 years clearly has technology far superior to ours. We need to understand their motivations." Lisa nodded in agreement. "Kelly, send a response. Tell them we're willing to establish communication, but all meetings will take place in neutral space. No approaches closer than 10,000 kilometers without explicit permission." Over the next several hours, a careful dance of diplomacy began. The aliens, who called themselves the Zentari, transmitted detailed information about their civilization and their role in the galaxy. They claimed to represent a confederation of over 200 species that had joined together for mutual benefit and protection. Ambassador Kethver, the lead Zentari diplomat, appeared on their screens as a tall, slender being with large eyes and smooth, pale skin. His movements were graceful and deliberate, and his voice carried a musical quality that somehow made him seem trustworthy despite the strangeness of his appearance. "We have watched your species with great interest," Kethver explained through the translation system. Humans show remarkable potential for growth and development. We believe you would make valuable additions to our confederation. What exactly does membership in your confederation involve? Lisa asked during one of their communication sessions. Shared technology, protection from hostile forces, access to trade routes spanning thousands of worlds, and the opportunity to learn from civilizations far older than your own, Kethver replied. In return, we ask only that you contribute your unique perspectives and abilities to our common cause. It sounded too good to be true, and Lisa's instincts told her to be suspicious. But the potential benefits for humanity were staggering. The medical advances alone could eliminate disease and extend human lifespan by centuries. Dr. Alex Carter spent days analyzing the biological data the Zentari provided about themselves and other Confederation species. What he discovered was fascinating and troubling. Every single member species of the Confederation appeared to be either herbivorous or omnivorous with strong, peaceful tendencies. None showed the aggressive traits that had shaped human evolution. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately," Alex said after completing his analysis. In her quarters, Alex shared his concerns. Something doesn't add up about the Zentari. They claim their confederation has existed for thousands of years, but I can't find any evidence of how they dealt with predatory species. Every civilization I've studied shows signs of conflict in their development, but the Zentari seem to have evolved in a completely peaceful environment. "What are you suggesting?" Lisa asked. "I think they're hiding something significant. No species achieves interstellar travel without encountering some form of conflict or competition. The fact that they've been watching us for 50 years suggests they have specific reasons for making contact now." Despite Alex's concerns, the negotiations continued. The Zentari offered increasingly generous terms, including immediate access to medical technology that could cure cancer and other diseases that plagued humanity. They also promised to share faster-than-light travel technology and provide Earth with a seat on their governing council. The pressure from Earth's government was enormous. Politicians and scientists alike saw the Confederation as humanity's chance to leap forward by thousands of years of development in a single generation. But Lisa noticed that the Zentari were particularly interested in human military capabilities and psychological profiles. "We are curious about your species' approach to conflict resolution," Kethver said during one session. "Humans seem to have developed unique strategies for dealing with hostile situations." Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. The question seemed innocent enough, but combined with Alex's observations about the peaceful nature of all Confederation species, it raised red flags. Colonel Ben Murphy arrived on the horizon 3 weeks into the negotiations, bringing with him a small team of elite military specialists. His presence was officially explained as providing security for the diplomatic mission, but Lisa suspected Earth's leaders wanted military assessment of the alien offer. Ben was a career soldier with combat experience in multiple conflicts around the world. He had the kind of tactical mind that could spot potential threats that diplomats might miss. After reviewing the available data about the Zentari and their confederation, he shared Lisa's growing concerns. "Captain, they're asking very specific questions about human military doctrine and our psychological response to combat stress," Ben reported. "They seem particularly interested in our ability to function in hostile environments and our willingness to take casualties to achieve objectives." "That could be innocent curiosity about a new species," Lisa suggested, though she didn't really believe it herself. "Maybe, but combined with everything else Dr. Carter has observed, it feels like they're evaluating us for something specific. The fact that every Confederation species is peaceful makes me wonder what they need us for." The final piece of the puzzle came when Kethver made his last offer. Along with all the promised technology and benefits, the Zentari requested that select human military units join their peacekeeping forces to help maintain order in contested regions of the galaxy. "It would be a great honor for your warriors to serve alongside our most respected forces," Kethver explained. "We have identified several regions where human tactical expertise could prove invaluable in maintaining peace and stability." Lisa felt her blood run cold. After weeks of careful observation and analysis, the true purpose of the Zentari's generous offer finally became clear. They weren't looking for partners or allies. They were recruiting soldiers. Ben Murphy stepped forward, with a grim smile on his face. Despite his growing suspicions about the Zentari's motives, the opportunity to see real alien technology and explore the galaxy was too tempting to refuse. Besides, if the Confederation truly was as peaceful as they claimed, what harm could come from a few human soldiers helping to maintain order? Ambassador Kethfer, Ben said firmly, I volunteer my unit for this peacekeeping mission. Colonel Ben Murphy felt the transport ship shudder as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel and entered the Nathay system. Through the small porthole beside his seat, he could see the contested world below, its surface scarred with massive craters and strange geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an unhealthy red glow. Doesn't look much like a peacekeeping mission, muttered Sergeant Karen Stone from the seat across from him. She was checking her equipment for the third time, a nervous habit that had kept her alive through 6 years of special operations. Sergeant Ryan Clark looked up from his tactical display and shook his head grimly. Intelligence reports show active combat zones across 4 continents. Whatever we're walking into down there, it's not a police action. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of preparation and travel through Zentari space. Ben's unit had been given advanced alien weapons and equipment, along with extensive briefings about their mission to maintain peace in contested regions. But the deeper they traveled into Confederation territory, the more obvious it became that something was seriously wrong. Captain Helen Brooks, the unit's strategist and intelligence specialist, had been analyzing every piece of data they could gather during the journey. What she discovered painted a disturbing picture of the Zentari's true situation. Colonel, Helen said quietly, moving to sit beside Ben as the transport began its descent toward the planet's surface. I've been reviewing the deployment assignments, and I think we need to talk. Ben turned to face her, noting the concern in her expression. Helen had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed, and her tactical insights had saved their unit multiple times in past operations. What did you find? Ben asked. The Zentari have divided the operational zones into 3 categories based on threat level. Category 1 zones are heavily fortified positions with full Confederation support. Category 2 zones have moderate defenses and regular supply lines. Category 3 zones are designated as forward reconnaissance areas with minimal support, and Ben prompted, though he suspected he already knew where this was heading. We're being assigned exclusively to Category 3 zones, along with all other human units. The safest positions are reserved for Zentari forces, while humans are being sent into the most dangerous areas with the least support. Ben felt his jaw clench with anger. The pattern was unmistakable. Humans were being used as expendable scouts to probe enemy defenses, while the Zentari stayed safely behind their fortifications. There's more, Helen continued. I managed to access some of the tactical databases during our last supply stop. The enemy we're facing isn't some minor insurgent group. They're called the Vorac, and they're unlike anything the Confederation has ever encountered before. The transport touched down on forward base Epsilon with a jarring impact that rattled every piece of equipment in the cargo bay. Through the opening rear door, Ben could see a hastily constructed outpost surrounded by energy barriers and automated defense turrets. The base looked more like a last-ditch stronghold than a peacekeeping facility. Zentari Base Commander Vextel greeted them at the landing pad, his large eyes scanning the human soldiers with an expression that seemed almost relieved. He was taller than Ambassador Kethfer and carried himself with military bearing, but there was something desperate in his manner that immediately put Ben on alert. Welcome to Nathay, Colonel Murphy, Vextel said through his translation device. We are grateful for your arrival. The situation has become quite challenging in recent weeks. What exactly are we dealing with out there? Ben asked directly, gesturing toward the scarred landscape beyond the base perimeter. The Vorac are unlike any opponent we have previously encountered, Vextel replied, his voice carrying a note of fear that the translation couldn't entirely hide. They appear to be some form of artificial intelligence housed in mechanical bodies, but they demonstrate learning capabilities that adapt to our tactics with disturbing speed. Dr. Amy Parker, who had been embedded with the military unit as a field researcher, stepped forward with her recording equipment active. She had volunteered for the assignment against the wishes of her superiors on Earth, driven by scientific curiosity about alien life forms. "Commander, can you provide more specific details about these Vorac capabilities?" Amy asked. "What makes them so different from conventional enemies?" Vextel's expression darkened. "They learn from every encounter. Weapons that prove effective in one battle become useless in the next as they develop countermeasures. Tactics that succeed against one unit fail completely when used against another, because they share information instantaneously across their entire network." Ben absorbed this information with growing concern. Fighting an enemy that could adapt in real time to human tactics would require completely new approaches to warfare. But before he could ask more questions, alarms began blaring throughout the base. "Incoming Vorac assault on Sector 7, announced the Zentari communications officer. "Human units report to deployment stations immediately." Ben's team was rushed to an armored transport along with 2 other human squads, while Zentari forces remained at the base to coordinate support operations. The transport raced across the damaged landscape toward a series of ridgelines where human forces were already engaged in combat. Sergeant Danny Foster, the unit's demolitions expert, checked his equipment one final time as they approached the battle zone. "Colonel, something feels wrong about this whole setup. Why are we going in without Zentari backup?" "Because we're the expendable assets," Ben replied grimly. "Helen was right. We're being used as cannon fodder to test enemy defenses." The transport stopped behind a rocky outcropping, and Ben's team deployed into defensive positions overlooking a valley where the real horror of their situation became clear. The Vorac were unlike anything they had been prepared to face. The enemy machines stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies composed of what appeared to be living metal that shifted and adapted as Ben watched. Their movements were precise and coordinated, suggesting a level of artificial intelligence that far exceeded anything Earth had developed. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be studying the human defensive positions with the same analytical approach that a scientist might use to examine laboratory specimens. "Contact front," called out Sergeant Stone as the Vorac began their advance. "Multiple mechanical targets approaching from the valley floor." Ben raised his alien-provided weapon and took aim at the nearest enemy unit. The energy discharge struck the Vorac center mass, causing it to stagger but not fall. As he watched in amazement, the machine's armor began to shift and thicken in the exact spot where his shot had hit. "They're adapting to our weapons in real time," Amy observed from her position behind a boulder. "Each hit is making them more resistant to that specific type of damage." The battle that followed was unlike anything Ben had experienced in 20 years of military service. Every successful tactic used against the Vorac became less effective with each repetition. Weapons that had worked minutes before became useless as the machines developed countermeasures. It was like fighting an enemy that could read their minds and adapt faster than they could think. "Fall back to secondary positions," Ben ordered as the Vorac pressed their advance. "Foster, can you set charges on the approach routes?" "Already on it, Colonel," Danny replied, working with explosive devices he had modified using Zentari technology. "But if these things learn as fast as they seem to, this will probably only work once." The improvised explosives detonated as the Vorac advanced through the narrow canyon approach, sending tons of rock cascading down on the mechanical attackers. For a moment, Ben thought they had achieved a significant victory. Then the surviving machines began working together to clear the debris, with an efficiency that suggested they had immediately adapted their tactics to account for similar ambush attempts in the future. "Colonel, I'm seeing something interesting," Amy reported while recording the enemy behavior. "Their learning algorithms appear to be designed around predictable, logical responses. But human tactical thinking includes elements of creativity and irrationality that they're having trouble processing. Ben realized she was right. When his team acted according to standard military doctrine, the Vorthak adapted quickly and effectively. But when they made decisions based on intuition, desperation, or pure stubborn refusal to retreat, the machines seemed confused and less coordinated in their responses. "Foster, I have a crazy idea," Ben said. "What if we do something completely illogical?" Danny grinned despite the desperate situation. "I'm always up for crazy, Colonel. What did you have in mind?" "We're going to advance directly into their strongest position using weapons we know don't work well against them." The plan was suicidal by any reasonable military standard, but Ben had noticed that the Vorthak seemed to expect human forces to behave rationally. A direct assault with inferior weapons against a superior defensive position violated every principle of tactical thinking, which might be exactly what they needed. Ben's team charged directly at the Vorthak formation, firing their least effective weapons and screaming battle cries that had no tactical purpose whatsoever. The machines seemed to freeze for several seconds, their learning algorithms apparently. General Patricia Wright studied the holographic display showing human deployment across 17 different star systems, each dot representing a unit that had been sent to the most dangerous frontline positions in the galaxy. She had arrived at Zentari High Command 3 weeks ago with orders to coordinate expanded human operations, but what she found was a systematic pattern of using her people as expendable shock troops. "The casualty reports don't match the official numbers being sent to Earth," reported Major Tony Rodriguez from his position at the communications console. Tony had been working to establish secure channels between human units scattered across Confederation space, and what he discovered was deeply troubling. "What kind of discrepancy are we talking about?" Patricia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Official reports claim human forces have sustained 12% casualties over the past 6 months. The real number is closer to 40%. The Zentari are systematically underreporting our losses while exaggerating our military contributions to make it seem like we're incredibly effective." Patricia felt her anger building, but she kept her expression neutral. Years of military command had taught her that emotional reactions rarely solve tactical problems. Instead, she focused on gathering information and developing solutions. Lieutenant Chris Taylor entered the command center carrying a datapad filled with tactical analysis from recent engagements. Chris had been developing new combat doctrines, specifically designed to exploit Vorthak weaknesses, and his work was beginning to show promising results. "General, I've completed the analysis of successful human operations over the past month," Chris reported. "There's a clear pattern emerging that the Zentari either don't understand or are choosing to ignore." "Explain," Patricia said. "Human forces are most effective when they operate independently of Zentari command structures. Every time we follow their tactical guidelines, casualties increase dramatically. But when human commanders make decisions based on their own judgment, success rates improve by over 60%. This information confirmed Patricia's growing suspicions about their alien allies. The Zentari weren't just using humans as cannon fodder, they were deliberately hampering human effectiveness to ensure continued dependence on Confederation resources and support. Corporal Michelle Davis approached from her workstation where she had been analyzing psychological profiles of both human and Vorthak behavior patterns. Michelle had a background in military psychology and had been working on techniques to weaponize human unpredictability against machine logic. "General, I think I've figured out why the Zentari tactics are so ineffective against the Vorthak," Michelle said. "Their entire military doctrine is based on minimizing casualties and achieving objectives through overwhelming technological superiority. They've never had to develop the kind of adaptive thinking that humans use instinctively. And Patricia prompted, "the Vorthak were designed to counter logical, predictable opponents. They can adapt to any systematic approach, but they struggle with the kind of creative problem-solving that humans excel at. The problem is that Zentari commanders keep trying to force us into their rigid tactical frameworks." Patricia realized that Michelle had identified the core issue. Human military effectiveness wasn't just being wasted, it was being actively suppressed by allies, who didn't understand how human warfare actually worked out. At that moment, an urgent transmission came through from Colonel Ben Murphy's unit on Nethai. The message was brief but alarming. Zentari forces withdrawing from Sector 12 without notification. Human units left unsupported in active combat zone. Requesting immediate evacuation or reinforcement. Patricia accessed the tactical display for Nethai and saw the situation immediately. Zentari forces had quietly pulled back from advanced positions, leaving human units exposed to Vorthak counterattacks. It was either gross incompetence or deliberate abandonment. Tony, get me a secure channel to all human unit commanders in this sector, Patricia ordered. It's time we started coordinating our own operations. Over the next several hours, Patricia established contact with human forces across multiple star systems. What she learned from these conversations painted a clear picture of systematic betrayal and manipulation by their Zentari allies. Major Steve Johnson reported from the Kilo system that his unit had been ordered to assault heavily fortified Vorthak positions with no artillery support, while Zentari forces remained in reserve. Captain Linda Shaw described similar situations on 3 different worlds where human casualties were mounting while Zentari units stayed safely behind defensive lines. Most disturbing was the report from Commander Jake Harrison, who had been monitoring Zentari communications from his position aboard the exploration vessel UES Horizon. Jake had discovered that the Zentari were conducting detailed studies of human combat behavior, psychological responses to stress, and tactical adaptation under extreme conditions. General, they're not just using us as soldiers, Jake reported during their secure communication. They're studying us like laboratory specimens. Every engagement is being recorded and analyzed for data about human military capabilities. Patricia realized the full scope of the deception. The Zentari hadn't recruited humans to help win their war against the Vorthak. They had recruited humans to gather intelligence about how Earth's military forces operated under combat conditions. The knowledge they were gaining could be used against humanity in the future. Sergeant Lavra Kim, working as a combat engineer on the front lines, had discovered another disturbing trend. The Zentari were providing human forces with equipment that was deliberately inferior to what their own troops used. Weapon systems had built-in limitations. Armor provided less protection than advertised, and communication equipment often failed at critical moments. It's like they want us to struggle, Lavra reported during a briefing session. I've been modifying our gear using Vorthak components salvaged from the battlefield, and the improvements are dramatic. Our standard issue weapons are operating at maybe 30% of their actual potential. This revelation led to a breakthrough in human tactical thinking. If the Zentari were deliberately hampering their effectiveness, then human forces needed to become completely self-sufficient to survive. Patricia began coordinating the development of an independent supply and communication network that operated parallel to official Confederation systems. Dr. Amy Parker had been analyzing captured Vorthak technology and made a discovery that changed everything. The machines weren't just artificial intelligences. They were the uploaded consciousness of an organic species that had been systematically exterminated by the Zentari centuries ago. General, the Vorthak were once a biological species called the Kethmer, Amy reported during a secure transmission from the battlefield. According to the data I've recovered, they were recruited by the Zentari using the same tactics being used on humanity now. They were told they would be partners in a galactic confederation, but they were actually being used as expendable soldiers in a war against another machine intelligence. What happened to them? Patricia asked. The Zentari turned them into weapons by forcing them to upload their consciousness into mechanical bodies. The process was supposed to be temporary, but once the war was won, the Zentari refused to allow them to return to biological form. Eventually, the Kethmor rebelled and declared war on their former allies. This information provided crucial insight into Zentari motivations and methods. They had a history of recruiting species with superior military capabilities, using them as weapons and then betraying them when they were no longer needed. Humanity was following the exact same pattern. Patricia shared this intelligence with human commanders across the galaxy, and the response was immediate and unanimous. Human forces began operating independently of Zentari command structures, sharing intelligence directly with each other and developing tactics specifically designed to counter both Vorac and Zentari capabilities. The transformation was remarkable. When human units operated according to their own tactical doctrines instead of following Zentari guidelines, their effectiveness increased dramatically. More importantly, they began winning engagements that had previously been impossible. Lieutenant Chris Taylor developed a new combat philosophy he called adaptive aggression, which combined traditional human military tactics with lessons learned from fighting the Vorac. The key insight was that humans needed to embrace their unpredictability as a weapon rather than trying to suppress it in favor of alien tactical systems. Corporal Michelle Davis created psychological warfare techniques that exploited both Vorac logical limitations and Zentari psychological weaknesses. Her methods were particularly effective because they used human emotional responses and irrational behavior as tactical weapons. Engineer Sergeant Lavra Kim established a network of human technicians who were reverse engineering both Vorac and Zentari technology to create hybrid weapon systems that were more effective than anything their supposed allies had provided. These innovations were shared between human units through secure channels that bypassed Confederation monitoring systems. The Zentari leadership began to notice the change in human performance, but they misunderstood. Dr. Alex Carter transmitted the final pieces of evidence to human forces across the galaxy, his hands shaking with rage as he uploaded the files that revealed the full extent of Zentari deception. The data packet contained irrefutable proof that humanity had been selected specifically for their predatory characteristics and was being systematically sacrificed in a war that their alien allies had already decided to lose. Transmission complete, Alex reported to Captain Lisa Rodriguez aboard the UES Horizon. Every human unit commander now has access to the intelligence data. There's no going back from this point. Lisa nodded grimly as she watched the tactical display showing human positions across 17 star systems. In the next few hours, those scattered units would either coordinate the largest military uprising in galactic history, or they would be destroyed piecemeal by forces that outnumbered them thousands to one. Colonel Ben Murphy received the transmission while his unit prepared for what they had been told was a routine patrol mission in Sector 15 of the Nethaz system. The mission orders had come directly from Zentari High Command, but Ben now understood their true purpose. His team was being sent into a Vorac kill zone to provide cover for a Zentari evacuation. Stand down from patrol preparation, Ben ordered his unit. We have new priorities. Sergeant Karen Stone looked up from her equipment check with surprise. Colonel, we're supposed to deploy in 30 minutes. The Zentari can handle their own evacuation, Ben replied, his voice carrying a cold edge that his soldiers had never heard before. We have more important work to do. Captain Helen Brooks accessed the intelligence data on her tactical display and immediately understood the scope of what they were facing. The Zentari hadn't just betrayed individual human units, they had orchestrated a galaxy-wide deception that had cost thousands of human lives while gathering detailed intelligence about Earth's military capabilities. Colonel, if this data is accurate, then every engagement we've fought has been designed to test our limits and document our responses, Helen reported. They've been building a complete profile of human warfare techniques. For what purpose? Asked Sergeant Ryan Clark. To develop countermeasures, Helen replied. Once they no longer need us to fight the Vorac, they'll want to ensure that humanity can never threaten their confederation. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as human commanders processed the intelligence data and realized the true nature of their situation. Major Tony Rodriguez coordinated secure communications between units, establishing the foundation for what would become known as Operation Homecoming, humanity's fight to return to Earth on their own terms. General Patricia Wright issued the first orders of the new campaign from her position at Zentari High Command. where she had been maintaining the appearance of cooperation while secretly planning rebellion. Her message was simple and direct. All human units are hereby authorized to use any means necessary to secure transportation back to Earth. Zentari forces are no longer considered allies. The response was immediate and devastating. Human units across the galaxy simultaneously turned on their Zentari coordinators, seizing control of communication systems, supply depots, and transportation hubs. Years of frustration and anger fueled actions that would have been unthinkable. Just hours before, Lieutenant Chris Taylor led the assault on Forward Base Epsilon's command center, using tactics that combined everything humans had learned about both Vorac and Zentari weaknesses. The base's defenders were completely unprepared for the sudden aggression of their former allies, and the facility fell within minutes. "Zentari Command, this is Forward Base Epsilon," Chris reported over the communication system, mimicking the calm tone of his former Zentari coordinator. "All human units have been deployed according to schedule. No issues to report." The deception bought precious time for human forces to coordinate their next moves without immediate retaliation from Confederation leadership. But Chris knew they couldn't maintain the illusion for long. Sergeant Danny Foster's demolitions expertise proved invaluable as human units targeted critical infrastructure throughout Zentari space. His modified explosives, created using hybrid human Vorac technology, were far more effective than anything the Confederation had previously encountered. The beauty of these charges is that they're designed using human intuition rather than logical engineering principles, Danny explained as he placed devices throughout a major supply depot. "The Zentari can't predict where we'll strike because we're not following any systematic pattern they can analyze." Corporal Michelle Davis implemented psychological warfare campaigns that targeted the fundamental weakness of Zentari society, their genetically modified inability to cope with aggressive behavior. Her broadcasts to Confederation forces described in vivid detail exactly what humans intended to do to anyone who tried to stop them from returning to Earth. "The psychological impact is devastating," Michelle reported to General Wright. "Their entire species has been bred to avoid conflict, so the mere threat of violence from us causes panic reactions that shut down their decision-making processes." Engineer Sergeant Lavra Kim established independent supply lines by capturing and repurposing Zentari manufacturing facilities. Her hybrid technology designs allowed human forces to produce weapons and equipment that was superior to anything the Confederation had previously seen. "We're not just stealing their stuff," Lavra explained while overseeing the conversion of a weapons factory. "We're improving it using design principles they can't understand." Human creativity combined with their advanced materials is producing results that shouldn't be theoretically possible. The Zentari High Council convened an emergency session as reports flooded in about human uprisings across their territory. Ambassador Kethver argued for immediate military intervention to suppress the rebellion, but General Wexler pointed out the obvious problem with that approach. "Honored counselors, we cannot simply attack human forces without understanding the full scope of their capabilities," Wexler explained. "They have demonstrated tactical innovations that our military doctrine cannot counter effectively. Direct confrontation may result in catastrophic losses. Then what do you suggest?" demanded Council Leader Thexenol, her large eyes reflecting the fear that was spreading throughout Confederation leadership. "Negotiation," Wexler replied reluctantly. "We must offer them terms that satisfy their demands while minimizing damage to our infrastructure." But negotiation was no longer an option. Human forces had discovered the full extent of Zentari betrayal and were operating under a new doctrine that Captain Helen Brooks had termed total human war. This approach combined every aspect of human military evolution, from ancient tactics to modern strategic thinking, focused on a single objective, getting home alive. Major Steve Johnson led human forces in the Kalo system in a coordinated assault on the Confederation's primary fleet maintenance facility. The attack used a combination of conventional military tactics and completely irrational human behavior that left the Zentari defenders unable to mount an effective response. "We're not just winning battles, Steve reported during a briefing. With other human commanders. We're rewriting the rules of warfare in this galaxy. Every engagement teaches us more about how to exploit their weaknesses while hiding our own vulnerabilities. The most shocking development came when human forces began establishing communication with Vorac units in several combat zones. Dr. Amy Parker's discovery that the machines were the uploaded consciousness of a previously betrayed species created an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. The Vorac understand betrayal in ways that other species cannot, Amy explained during a secure transmission to General Wright. When we showed them evidence of how the Zentari manipulated both our species, they agreed to localize ceasefires and intelligence sharing. This development terrified the Zentari leadership more than any direct military threat. The prospect of their two most dangerous enemies working together represented an existential threat to Confederation survival. Colonel Ben Murphy found himself coordinating joint operations with Vorac tactical units against Zentari positions on Nephe. The cooperation was limited and cautious, but it proved devastatingly effective against their common enemy. It's strange fighting. Alongside machines that were trying to kill us last week, observed Sergeant Karen Stone as she watched. Vorac units provide covering fire for a human assault on a Zentari communication center? They're not just machines, Ben replied, watching the tactical precision of their temporary allies. They're people who went through the same betrayal we're experiencing now. That gives us common ground. The joint human Vorac operations revealed the true weakness of Zentari military strategy. Their entire approach to warfare was based on the assumption that their enemies would remain predictably hostile to each other. The possibility of cooperation between species they had manipulated had never been considered. General Patricia Wright coordinated the largest operation of the campaign, simultaneous assaults on 12 major Zentari military installations across 6 star systems. The attacks were timed to occur within a 30-minute window, maximizing confusion and preventing coordinated responses. General Patricia Wright stood in what had once been the Zentari High Council chambers, now serving as the headquarters for the Terran Colonial Administration. Through the massive windows, she could see human ships patrolling the orbital space. Around the former Confederation capital world, their presence a constant reminder that the galaxy's power structure had fundamentally changed. 6 months had passed since the Terran awakening began and the transformation was complete. Human forces controlled 40% of former Zentari space, with more systems joining the new Terran Colonial Republic every week. The speed of the conquest had surprised everyone, including Patricia herself. Status report, Patricia requested from Major Tony Rodriguez, who now served as her chief intelligence coordinator. 17 more systems have requested membership. In the Republic this week, Tony reported. Most are minor species that were previously under Zentari protection. They're offering tribute and requesting defensive alliances. Patricia nodded, studying the galactic map that showed the new reality of interstellar politics. The carefully maintained balance that the Zentari had enforced for millennia was gone, replaced by a new order based on capability rather than ancient agreements. Commander Jake Harrison arrived from Earth with the second wave of colonial administrators and technical specialists. His ship, now designated as the flagship of the Terran exploration fleet, had brought news that changed everything about humanity's future in the galaxy. General, Earth's leadership has made their decision, Jake reported. Full colonial expansion is authorized. The President has signed orders establishing the Terran Colonial Republic as humanity's official galactic government. What about the Zentari remnant government? Patricia asked. They're confined to 12 heavily defended core worlds and are no longer considered a significant threat. Earth's position is that we'll leave them alone as long as they don't interfere with human expansion or threaten any of our protectorate species. The war against the Vorac continued, but now as equals rather than expendable soldiers. Colonel Ben Murphy led joint human Vorac task forces that had proven devastatingly effective against the remaining Zentari resistance. The cooperation between biological and mechanical intelligence had created tactical possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. The Vorac appreciate our approach to problem solving, Ben reported during a briefing session. They have the computational power to analyze every possible scenario, but they lack the creative thinking to develop truly innovative solutions. Humans provide the unpredictable element that makes their tactical precision even more effective. Dr. Amy Parker had established the Institute for Xenobiological Studies in the former Zentari capital, dedicated to understanding how human evolution provided advantages over other galactic species. Her research was revealing disturbing truths about the Confederation's previous dominance. The Zentari weren't successful because they were superior, Amy explained during a presentation to colonial administrators. They succeeded because they systematically eliminated or controlled every species that could challenge them. We're the first civilization they encountered that was strong enough to fight back when we discovered their deception. Captain Helen Brooks had been promoted to general and now commanded all human military operations in the galaxy. Her doctrine of total human war had become the standard approach for dealing with hostile civilizations, but she was also developing new strategies for managing the growing Terran Republic. We need to be careful not to become what the Zentari were, Helen warned during a strategy meeting. Our military advantages give us tremendous power, but how we use that power will determine what kind of civilization we become. The Remnant. Zentari government made one final attempt at negotiation, sending Ambassador Kethver to meet with human leadership under a flag of truce. The meeting took place aboard a neutral space station, with representatives from several other species observing the proceedings. Honored humans, Kethver began, his voice carrying the same musical quality that had once seemed so trustworthy. The Zentari Confederation offers a formal peace treaty recognizing human, territorial claims and guaranteeing non-interference in Terran affairs. Patricia studied the alien diplomat who had orchestrated humanity's recruitment into this galactic war. Kethver looked older and more fragile than she remembered, the stress of his civilization's collapse evident in his posture and expressions. Ambassador, your confederation no longer exists in any meaningful sense, Patricia replied coldly. You control 12 worlds out of the thousands you once ruled. You're not in a position to offer treaties. You're requesting terms for your survival. What are your demands? Kethver asked, his large eyes reflecting defeat and fear. Complete access to all Confederation archives and historical records. Full disclosure of every species you've manipulated over the past 10,000 years. Reparations for human casualties caused by your deception. And most importantly, you will never again interfere with human affairs or the affairs of any species under our protection. The terms were harsh but not genocidal. Patricia could have demanded the complete elimination of Zentari civilization, and many human commanders had advocated for exactly that approach. But she understood that humanity's long-term success in the galaxy would depend on being seen as firm but fair rather than simply another brutal conqueror. Dr. Alex Carter arrived from Earth with the third wave of colonial expansion, bringing with him thousands of scientists, engineers, and administrators who would transform captured Zentari worlds into human colonies. His first priority was establishing research facilities to study and improve upon Confederation technology. The Zentari had access to thousands of years of scientific development from hundreds of different species, Alex explained to the colonial leadership. By combining their accumulated knowledge with human creativity and innovation, we can achieve technological advances that would have taken centuries to develop independently. Engineer Sergeant Lavra Kim had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer for the Colonial Republic, overseeing the integration of human, Zentari, and Vorac technologies into new hybrid systems. Her work was producing weapons, ships, and equipment that exceeded anything previously seen in the galaxy. We're not just copying alien technology, Lavra reported during a presentation to Earth's leadership. We're improving it in ways the original designers never imagined. Human engineering principles applied to advanced alien materials and power systems are creating entirely new possibilities. The transformation of galactic society was accelerating as more species requested membership in the Terran Republic. Captain Lisa Rodriguez led diplomatic missions to dozens of worlds, negotiating treaties and establishing the framework for humanity's new galactic civilization. Most species are genuinely relieved to be free of Zentari control, Lisa reported to Patricia. The Confederation's peaceful facade hid a system of exploitation and manipulation that kept everyone except the Zentari themselves in subordinate positions. The Vorac had established their own independent territory in former Confederation space, but maintained close cooperation with human forces. The mechanical intelligence had proven to be valuable allies, sharing technology and tactical expertise. While respecting human autonomy. Dr. Amy Parker's research revealed the full scope of Zentari crimes against galactic civilization. Her team had discovered evidence of systematic genocide, forced relocations, and the deliberate suppression of technological development among subject species. The Confederation's peaceful image had been built on the bones of countless civilizations. We've identified at least 40 species that were eliminated by the Zentari over the past 5,000 years, Amy reported. In each case, the pattern was the same: recruitment as military allies, exploitation as expendable soldiers, and eventual elimination when they were no longer needed. This discovery provided moral justification for human actions and convinced many wavering species to join the Terran Republic. Humanity was not just conquering territory. They were liberating civilizations that had been oppressed for millennia. General Patricia Wright established the first Terran Colonial Assembly, bringing together representatives from human colonies and allied species to create a new form of galactic government. The system was designed to prevent the kind of centralized control that had allowed Zentari manipulation to flourish. "We're building something that has never existed before," Patricia explained to the assembly during its opening session. Galactic civilization based on merit, cooperation, and mutual respect rather than manipulation and exploitation. The remnant of Zentari civilization was allowed to survive in their core worlds, but under strict monitoring to ensure they could never again threaten galactic peace. Ambassador Kethvar spent his remaining years writing memoirs about the rise and fall of the Confederation, his final work serving as a warning about the dangers of underestimating humanity. Colonel Ben Murphy led the final joint human-Vorac operation against the last major Confederation stronghold, bringing an end to organized Zentari resistance. The battle was more symbolic than strategic, representing the complete triumph of the galaxy's new apex predator over their former masters.